So when we think of voodoo, voodoo is a way of life. It is a way of life that is wrapped in a culture. It is a way of life with a spiritual core that goes back to the divine itself at the very beginning of human time. It is a way of life that everybody else have a fragment of and use to organize their theologies around the world, while at the same time denying the parent people that gave them the very foundation for their theology. I'm talking about everything from Buddhism to Islam, from Christianity to Judaism. All of them are nothing more than representatives of fragments from the periphery, innovations on fragments from the periphery of the African spiritual system, which we call voodoo.
The word voodoo comes from West Africa and Benin, formerly known as Dahomey, and it means a sacred dance to the spirit.
Doherty Desir is a high priestess. She is also an Ivy League educated anthropologist and designer who says that voodoo is poorly understood.
With the remarks made by Pat Robertson following the earthquake, we as Haitians supposedly made a pact with the devil. And so now we're being punished for that.
And anybody that think they want to have a problem with that or challenge me with that, I will debate anybody. I will sit with anybody. I will whatever with anybody to let them know and understand that there is no way you can talk about a voodoo without talking about the way of life of man in its purest form. That is the first manifestation of man's interpretation on earth to represent the divine blueprint of the Creator itself by recognizing the essence of the Creator in all things and respecting that divine essence that manifests in all things.
We don't believe in heaven and hell. There is only life.
Is there a similarity or is there an aspect of voodoo God which also was a part of the Egyptian spiritual
The Egyptian system could be called a voodoo system. It's the same system. The Haitians call the elements of the divine that they recognize loas. The Egyptians call those elements of the divine netches. They're talking about the same thing. The netches or the netcheru of Egypt is the same loas of Haiti and the same orisha of Nigeria. They're all talking about the manifestation of aspect of the divine power and essence in all other living things. And when you think of voodoo, voodoo is not a religion. It is not a theocracy. It is a total way of life that involves the medicine, that involves the spiritual, that involves the pharmacology, that involves the psychology, that involves the sociology. All of these things are interrelated into one system that we call voodoo. And it has many different elements and many different levels of priesthood that do the many different functions. A priest is nothing more than a scientist who's a practitioner and who's a specialist in one area or another. Today in the West, what they're calling scientists is what we once called priests back in the early days. Okay. And so you may have, there's an element of voodoo that deals with surgery. There's an element that deals with pharmacology. There's an element that deals with psychology. I'll just give you a sense of understanding. There's three major orishas that everybody in the West know about. They know about Shango, they know about Oya, they know about Ogun. And so they'll say, oh, Ogun is the god of war, the god of iron. And Oya is the goddess of wind. And Shango is the god of lightning and thunder. But those are anthropomorphic symbols with metaphoric labels. If you look at the essence of what they were to symbolize in the human spirit and in nature itself, Shango in the human spirit symbolizes the courage within a human being that recognize the need for higher spiritual growth. And once that is realized, that you have the courage, which they looked at a king as being the most courageous in society. So the courage to change yourself spiritually requires great courage. And so Shango is to symbolize the courage within any human being to change themselves to a higher spiritual self. But to do that, once you realize the need for change, you got to do something. You've got to marry change in process. Oya, the female symbol, which represents the wind, which is a symbol of metaphoric change, then marries Shango. So now the need for change has married the process of change. But the need for change now married the process of change. The process, the cycle is not complete. So now change, the woman, must take a second husband, which the West called polyandry. But there was no woman actually doing this. This is a metaphor. The second husband becomes Ogun. Ogun, the god of iron, the god of war, represents transformation. Well, transformation follows change. You understand? So when you're talking about the story of Shango and the story of Oya and Ogun, you're talking about the courage to realize the need for change. You're talking about the transformation that comes as a result of the change. And so that's voodoo. That's, if you want to call it our theology, that's part of our theology. There's another concept in the voodoo system, it's called awu. And in awu, this concept awu has to do with, it means like you come and you go. It has to do with what the West tends to call reincarnation. But in the African system, reincarnation is not like the Asian system. The Asian system, you can die and come back as a bumblebee or a fly or an animal. But the African system, you can only come back as a human being. And you can only come back in the gene pool and bloodline out of which you left. So you come back in your family, which is in all of our traditions. You know, you from the South Carolina like me, we grew up in the Geechee Gullah culture, which is a voodoo culture for us over here. We call it hoodoo or root, but it's the same African system. And anytime a baby is born, those elders get together to decide what? Who done come back? Who this boy be? Who this gal be? Who done come back now? Or this is so-and-so ancestor, this is so-and-so. That is embedded in the African traditional system. So in the system of voodoo, it says you get a chance to come and to go into this world and out of this world to perfect yourself so you can then integrate back with the divine and become one with the divine again, what the West call heaven. Okay? And in each of those 8 coming and going cycles, you have 12 steps of perfection to fulfill in terms of ethical, moral, principle growth in your character. And once you've completed the 8 and you've perfected it, then you go back to become one with God again and a part of the divine essence, expressing yourself on all of the other aspects of the divine essence. That's our theology. That's voodoo.